So hello everyone, I'd like to now officially welcome you to today's webinar, Orienting Your VISTA, Planning for Your VISTA's Arrival. I'm Jessica Birch with the Corporation for National and Community Service, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. I'll also be facilitating the live Q&A at the end of the session. Also joining us are Rachel Raddick and Jenny Farrell from our partners at Education Northwest, who have helped to prepare today's webinar and will be managing the WebEx technology. You'll also see them in the chat and Q&A to help address questions you may have during the session. So what are we going to talk about today? So because this is the first of a two-part webinar series, we are going to cover a few things in this one that we're not going to cover in the second one. They're really meant to build off one another. And this whole series is designed to support you with both planning and implementing a successful OSAT. So this one is planning. We're in the planning stage here. So what we hope you get out of this webinar is that you understand the importance and key elements of a successful OSAT plan or on-site orientation and training. We use a lot of acronyms, so OSAT, on-site orientation and training. Determine what content is important to include in your OSAT by analyzing needs within the VAD, the community, and your site specifically. We want to be able to have you ensure that your OSAT plan includes strategies for providing training aligned to the various responsibilities of members participating in either a PSO Classic or the new self-directed virtual member orientation. Lastly, we'd like you to be able to identify tools and resources available on the VISTA campus to support the development of your OSAT plan. So I'd like to welcome our main speakers for today. I'd first like to welcome Ryan. Ryan Fewens-Bliss is a National VISTA trainer with Education Northwest, which is CNCS's training partner. In his quote-unquote day job, he serves as the Deputy Director for Community Investment at the Michigan College Access Network, or MCAN, having joined the staff in March 2013. Ryan hails from Northern Michigan and received his undergraduate and graduate degrees from Central Michigan University in Integrative Public Relations and Educational Administration and Community Leadership, respectively. Prior to joining MCAN, Ryan served as a consultant to local, state, and national nonprofits and educational institutions. He has also worked for the Jackson College Access Center, Michigan Campus Compact, and Saginaw Valley State University. Ryan has managed both VISTA and AmeriCorps state programs. Ryan served as a locally elected township trustee in Michigan's Bath Charter Township for almost 5 years and currently serves as an appointed member of the Bath Township Public Library Board of Trustees. I'd also like to welcome Michelle Eastman. Michelle is Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Rainbows United Incorporated, a not-for-profit in Wichita, Kansas. Rainbow serves more than 3,500 children ages birth to 21 with special needs and their families in the local community. Michelle oversees internal and external communications, publications, branding, printing, design, and volunteers. Under her leadership, Rainbows applied for and secured positions through the AmeriCorps VISTA program, as well as several interns. She embraces her challenging role as supervisor, mentor, and encourager, and seeks to inspire each individual to greater confidence and accomplishment beyond this year of service with Rainbows. So thank you both for being here. You're going to hear from them in just a few minutes. So let's get started by talking about what is OSAT. OSAT can best be understood by breaking up the acronym. As I mentioned, OSAT is on-site orientation and training. So let's start with the first part. On-site. On-site means it takes place at your site. It's when your VISTA members are at their work site, reporting for duty and meeting with you. So the second part, orientation. So that's orientation to not only the organization that they're going to be serving with, but also to the community, getting to know the community, your organization, and things that are going to help them succeed in their VISTA assignment. And training, the T. Training, this is anything about issues, around what they're going to be doing specifically as a VISTA member, training on skills they may need to fulfill their VAD, or any other kinds of training that they need to know to be successful. So a couple of things about OSAT. As I said, that this starts when your VISTA arrives on site. It includes key elements about the host organization, which If you are an intermediary or a sub-site, that's a distinction there. So if you are a sub-site, you want to make sure that your VISTA member is also learning about the key elements of the host organization, the intermediary, as well as you. And intermediary is the same thing. You want to make sure people are up to date with the information about the sub-site. If you're a single site, then obviously orientation to you as well as to the community. OSAT, as a lot of you mentioned in the chat, helps prepare VISTAs for a year by providing information about the issues and the host sites approach those issues at the beginning of service and helps develop transferable skills that they can use now and later. It introduces them to you, the sponsor, the community, then the goals and operation of the VISTA project, and it provides the member basic knowledge and skills that they need to get started off on the right foot. OSAT may last 1 week, it may last 2, it may last up to 4. It really depends on the needs of the project and the community, and also on the needs of your VISTA member. OSAT is also informed by the VISTA assignment description, or the VAD, and your project's goals and objectives. An OSAT plan should be submitted to your state office at least a month before a VISTA is scheduled to arrive on site. So those are just the basics of OSAT. I'm now going to hand it over to Ryan. He's going to dig deeper into OSAT and planning for it. So Ryan, take it away.
Thanks, Jessica. It's really great to be with everyone today. I've had the honor of working with VISTA supervisors for several years around planning their OSAT, and I'm going to share with you some of the things that I learned, both from doing things right, but honestly, mostly by making some mistakes. So I'm going to draw upon the curriculum we also use at supervisor orientation for those of you that have attended that. So how do you start planning an OSAT? I find it really helpful to start with a few questions. They're on your screen now. What does the VISTA need to know? How is that information best delivered? Who needs to be involved with the OSAT? And are there additional considerations? Let's dive into each of these so we can start building your OSAT plan. So that first question was, what does a VISTA need to know? And that's really the best place to start when planning your OSAT. OSAT's more than likely the VISTA's first introduction to your organization and their assignment, so you want to make sure that what you cover in OSAT is enough for them to hit the ground running, as Jessica just mentioned. Information, as always, is power. The more information the VISTA member has, the more likely the member is going to be able to perform those activities necessary to reach their project goals and address the community needs. At the same time, you want to make sure you don't overwhelm the member with too many facts and details, only what he or she will need to get started. Training and learning is an expectation of the entire year, not just prior to and during OSAT. So you've got an entire year. So there are some essential elements of an OSAT. One of those is member expectations. So some things to cover when thinking about member expectations. What's the protocol in your organization for communication? How will meetings be set up between you and the VISTA member? What are the service hours? Covering these just really basic expectations up front, I think someone mentioned this in the chat actually, will allow your needs and that of the VISTA member to be addressed from the start and a working agreement to be put in place. Everyone has the same expectation. You want to talk about culture and the mission of the organization. What's the organization's role in the community? What is the mission of the organization? Again, some of those basics in introducing the VISTA around to staff and colleagues. You also want to talk about the bigger picture related to the VISTA project in the community. So this is like, how does the VISTA project fit into the organization and all the other programs that you offer? Giving an introduction to the community and key members of the community. Providing an opportunity to read the submitted VISTA grant, the grant that your organization or the intermediary organization submitted to CNCS. I find that to be really great for transparency. Obviously, the VAD, the VISTA assignment description, is going to be a key piece of OSAT. What is the VAD asking of the VISTA member? How do the activities build up, to accomplish the objectives and the goal? And finally, skills and knowledge needed to accomplish that VAD because it is so critical. What are the actual skills the VISTA is bringing to the project in the VAD? What are the skills that they are lacking that you need to make sure that you fill in the gaps for? What training and resources do they need to develop those skills? We've pulled out a really cool example of an OSAT plan for you to take a peek at, and I think it's really helpful when you start to think about those aspects that we just talked about, but I think it's even more helpful to see what this looks like. So this is an example from Lines for Life, which is associated with the Oregon Health Authority. I really like this example from the field. I think if you take a peek in, you might have to squint because it might be small on your screen, but you can see basically the first couple of hours during this OSAT is a welcome and overview of the organization, the policies of the organization, personnel forms for the VISTA to fill out. Obviously, they're not a staff member or an employee in the same way, but there are probably other personnel forms. Getting a tour of the facility. So these are real-life examples of a OSAT plan that covers some of the content that we just talked about. This is just one good example from the field. I know that many of you have strengths in this particular area around OSAT, excuse me, in other areas. While I happen to be the one presenting today, I think there's more knowledge on the other side of the webinar from all of you. So I want to take a second to hear from you in a chat. Jessica?
Thanks, Ryan. So what unexpected information have you learned is essential to share with your VISTAs? So Ryan talked about the example that we just talked about with, they go over policies and personnel forms. Is there something that maybe in your first iteration of OSAT was like, oh man, they really needed information about this, and I totally didn't even cover that because I didn't even think about it. Is there something that you've learned? So in the chat box, please let us know. Send your information to all participants. We want your comments to be visible to everyone, so please put that in there. And if you're on a mobile device, you'll find the chat feature at the bottom of the participant panel. Yeah, take a look and let's see. Yeah, Rachel, thank you for just posting that in there. What unexpected information have you learned is essential to share with your VISTAs? So Ryan, I know as we wait for responses to come in, is there anything that was like an aha moment for you when you started supervising VISTAs? Like, whoa, I didn't even think about telling them that until all of them had these questions about it.
Yeah, culture was a big question for me and something that I missed in the first go-round with my VISTA Corps. Simple things like the dress code. The CEO of our organization always wore a suit and tie, but the rest of us did not. And so there was mixed communication going to my VISTAs that were in-house. And then I was an intermediary, so we had VISTAs out at different sites across the state on college campuses, and each of them had their own dress code and their own culture around that. So it was this weird mix of we've got to be able to provide this information, but it's really, really important that they also get it from those sub-site supervisors too. So culture was a big piece. Great, yeah. That's something that maybe I wouldn't have thought about either, or how, if it's just where you've always lived, maybe you're like, oh, I don't even realize there's a different culture here, or I'm just used to this. We have some great things coming in on the chat. Emily says that she learned that they needed to add more content and training opportunities about the opportunity gap. She said that they're a network of elementary schools. So yeah, adding that context, it's hard to go in with something when we have all these assumptions or things that we already know, and not touching base on that first can, be not as helpful to our VISTA members, so that's wonderful. Michael said how the VISTA project fits into the local community. So great. How is what you're doing here helpful to the community? How does it fit into the bigger community? Curtis said, because the VISTA is neither a staff member nor a student, there are specific security issues that must be clarified between the VISTA and the security office. For example, can he or she be cleared to drive a campus car? So yeah, things like that, nuanced things that, VISTAs are kind of unique, so maybe those unique things that you hadn't thought about before. And Jennifer here said kind of basic office etiquette, like using headphones when listening to music or attending a webinar. Yeah, a lot of etiquette, orienting. Looks like we have a VISTA leader here. She said that, the ups and downs of service. So for those supervisors here who've been VISTA members, share your wisdom, share those things that maybe a new VISTA would like to know or that you would have liked to know as a VISTA. But Ryan, these are great. So now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, and Michelle is going to talk about some of her experiences with this. Michelle.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be joining you on this discussion today, and I am excited to share with you some of my experiences in working with VISTAs. I've really enjoyed having VISTAs at Rainbows. It really was a privilege to be part of their VISTA experience. One thing that I wanted to point out is VISTAs need to know really everything that our new employees need to know. I think having kind of the outline of the new employee orientation covers things that I never would have thought of. I don't know, depending on the agency, I was able to have the VISTA sit in on a new employee orientation, so they got to learn about the dress code, where to park, of course, the hours I expected, if they needed keys to the building, what those particular procedures were, computer use, that sort of thing. So really that was super helpful because somebody had already thought through a lot of those topics and knew the answers, and I was able to benefit from that, as well as then clarify afterwards with the VISTA. Did they understand those things? Did they see the blue line in the parking lot that you are supposed to kind of park behind, that sort of thing, just to clarify those afterwards. Other things that I have put in the on-site orientation is time to really observe in the facility. We do programs at a couple different facilities. One is for preschool children, and the other one is for school-age children. And they all have special needs and disabilities. And I learned that this might be the first interaction for the VISTA with this sort of population. And so getting them in to observe and to be part of a classroom or the after-school program was really important in the beginning, because they were going to be spending a year really immersed with children with special needs and their families. Another thing that I thought was really important was just to have information about the area. Many of our VISTAs came from other states, and they weren't familiar with Kansas or Wichita. And so to have kind of the local publications about things going on, different festivals that were coming up, things that they might want to participate in, were really things that they valued. In fact, one of our VISTAs that came from another state, she would take weekend trips and see different things that were within driving distance, and she saw more of Kansas than most of us who live here. And that was really inspiring, and not everyone's going to do that, but it was just really neat to see her branch out and really take on that information that we had provided, and how excited she was to be able to see different parts and have those experiences. Another thing was places to live, and providing those in advance. Since we had several VISTAs, we got to kind of figure out where kind of the arrangements with the contracts and things at the different places, what really suited them, and so we shared that information. And, you know, of course it was up to them what they did with it, but often that was really helpful as well. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Michelle. Oh, I'm going to turn it right back over to Ryan.
Lots of thanks for you, Michelle, because you had such great ideas. It's really great to have you join us with real-life examples today. So continuing our questions, once you know what you need to include in your OSAT, you then need to think about how best to deliver that information. Some things are best learned by reading the information, some things you have to experience. This question is tempered, of course, by your organization's capacity and ability. For example, you may have access to professionally created training videos from a partner organization or a national organization, or your organization on the flip side might not have a great deal of technology. So these opportunities and limitations will help you create the borders within which your OSAT can exist. Some ideas that most organizations will have the capacity and ability to carry out include involving key community leaders. Putting your VISTAs in front of community leaders serves many purposes. I'm all about the win-win. You'll hear me say that a couple of times today. They'll receive critical information directly from those in the community, and they'll have a chance to ask some great questions, which they practice at PSO. They'll hopefully feel appreciated to have an audience with important people. Perhaps even they'll meet someone that could serve as a mentor to them during their year of service. There's benefits to you as the organization as well. Engaging community partners brings honor to them, or at least we hope it does. Hopefully they'll see that you value them as a partner in the work. And at the very basic level, I've always found it's nice to remind community leaders that your organization exists and that you're doing some pretty cool things with some pretty cool people. Homework. I want to talk about having a member review the project application and other collateral, and I usually call this homework. You can do this either prior to them arriving, and they can read and be prepared for that, or I like to have it assigned during the OSAT because then they're seeing it or reading it or reviewing it live, and I can have more in-depth discussions about it in real time as they digest that information. I mentioned earlier allowing the VISTA to see the project application. I really like the transparency that this shows, meaning that there are no secrets and no mystery about what we're all doing. Sometimes when I've led cores, there can get this core feeling like there's secrets or mysteries. If they read the application, they know what we're all about. And then I like to use other pieces of collateral as well, strategic plans, annual reports, news articles, other publications, all really work well. The key to the concept of homework, as I'm calling it, is ensuring, again, you don't give them too much information and that you bring the information back to the larger conversation so the VISTA doesn't feel like you wasted their time or just gave them busy work because you were too busy to deal with them. I like the concept of field trips as well. The VISTA really is meant to be embedded in the community. So field trips are a great way to get him or her more understanding of the geography of the community and your partnerships. Like Michelle was talking about, having a VISTA traveling all over the state, getting a feel for the geography. I think it's best to send the VISTA with some specific tasks when you send them out into the community, so the assignment doesn't feel too much like show and tell for a community partner or an agency. And then I like to connect those tasks, obviously, to the VAD activities that the VISTA will be called upon to do. Instead of just sending the VISTA to a partner for a meet and greet, have them come up with 2 or 3 ideas to strengthen that partnership or create new connections or leverage the partner's resources. Asking them how we might highlight the partner over the course of the next year, or are there more opportunities to communicate with the partner? Then the VISTA is engaged in the information that they're being provided as part of the OSAT. I think that is helpful. I also really liked to employ shadowing staff. So at a minimum, I've always had preset meetings with all staff members that are, reasonably connected to the VISTA service. So when the VISTA comes in on day 1, they already have a schedule with some activities. Again, that feels like we're ready for them and that the entire organization is valuing the new team member. And where a VISTA might have a stronger connection in their VAD to one of my colleagues' work, I would have the VISTA spend more time with that team member. So for instance, one of my colleagues ran a grant program that overlapped with service sites that our VISTAs would serve in. So when there were grantee meetings or grantee orientations, site visits, I'd send the VISTA to attend the meeting or the site visit. I'd have the VISTA actually accompany the colleague on the site visit to see how my colleague runs his or her program, and really to pick up the language and how we talk about the work and how our organization is using the language with partners. And it's nice for the VISTA to get into the field and see how the organization operates and communicates, and honestly, my colleagues always appreciated having an extra pair of hands at these events too. Community meetings and events, I think Michelle mentioned this as well. This theme of embedding the VISTA in the community, it continues to rear its head. That's purposeful, not by happenstance. I found that most of my VISTAs were really eager to get into the field, and when they went into the community meetings, it was often at their own behest. I didn't have to send them, which was really cool. They had heard about a meeting or an event, or a partner had invited them or something like that. It rarely took arm twisting, frankly, to get them to go. It's a great way for them to experience how the community functions. I served, as you heard in my introduction, as an elected official for 5 years and was shocked at how few people attended our meetings, even when we were discussing really critical elements of the community. So these types of activities are really great for the VISTA to get plugged into and to start to make their own presence known in the community, build their own reputation. Where you can have these opportunities built right into the OSAT plan, the more richer the training is going to be. Never doubt the power of investing some time in chatting with your VISTAs. I found this to be helpful in getting the VISTA to better understand why we operated like we did as an organization, or even something specific like why our board had made a specific decision or why we approach a situation a certain way. These are the things that you might not jot down on a list of topics when you're brainstorming what you want to discuss, but come organically and come in natural conversation. For me, it was often in my office, or in the car while driving to a meeting, or even over lunch. So I really recommend building in some time in your OSAT plan to chat with your VISTA pretty regularly so they feel like they have your attention. And it can be casual. It doesn't have to be so formal. Again, I think it's really helpful to look at real examples. So here is another piece of the OSAT plan from our friends at Lines for Life, again associated with Oregon Health Authority. And you can see that the VISTA is scheduling meetings with their leadership team members and meeting with prevention team members. So there's other people involved in the delivery of this content. And it's being delivered not necessarily in a classroom manner, but they're getting out and they're meeting with people, discussing the work that's happened so far, discussing the disparities, so some really great content. And then you'll notice at the very bottom of that square or rectangle, it says, when not in meetings, read through relevant documents on the prevention SharePoint sites to get background knowledge. And so that's really what we were talking about with that collateral material. So when they're not otherwise occupied, the VISTA is looking at some of those publications to try to understand the organization a little bit better. Let's go back to Michelle and hear how she delivered some of this OSAT information. Michelle?
Yeah, you bet. When I put together the OSAT, I really did it in a calendar format and then sent out the Outlook appointments to the VISTA. So they had it written down in a calendar that they could print and take, as well as it would come up on their computer, and we had the ability for them to connect it to their phone if they wanted. I also in some cases was able to send it ahead of time. Some people really like to know what is going to happen when they get there. And so just because, you know, you have to submit it a month ahead of time, I had that information and was able to share that so that for those people that were more anxious about coming, they kind of knew what to expect. And there was some ease then of knowing, okay, this is going to be laid out and there is a plan for when I get there. One of the other things that really by trial and error I found made the year more successful was I did set out a regular time each day to meet with the VISTA. We were located in the same building but different parts of the building, and sometimes our paths rarely crossed during the day. So I really set out a 10 o'clock meeting every day. That way that if that VISTA had questions, they knew that they had that time at 10 o'clock where they could ask their questions and that they would get answers. And I knew that they were going to be there and that we could review their calendar. I could give them new information, talk about what was going to happen that day, and it really worked well. They knew that they could count on me for that, and if we needed to adjust that time because of something else, we tried to do that in advance so that really that was their time and it was protected. And that really helped the VISTAs to remain on track, to really have that trust that in our relationship that I would be there for them and that they would get what they needed during that time. Also, a tour of the building is really important, and I felt that having people sort of introduce themselves and tell about their job was a way to start developing that relationship. So that worked really well instead of me just talking on the tour. So back to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm really glad you found power in those quick conversations with VISTAs too, and I love your idea about the Outlook calendar appointments. It really sets the culture around meetings in your office, so thanks for the great ideas. We've now talked about how you determine content and delivery. Now we're going to need to fill in the details about who will be part of the OSAT. I consistently recommend to supervisors not to do this alone. I feel incredibly strongly about that. It inevitably becomes overwhelming, and then you try to scale back the effort so you can manage it, which decreases the impact you're trying to make. Don't go it alone. At least that's what used to happen to me, so hopefully that doesn't happen to you. While you might be the official VISTA supervisor of record, taking on a VISTA is actually a responsibility that the entire organization commits to, and in best practice, the community commits to that as well. If everything's on you as a supervisor, that's not a recipe for sustainability. So before we jump in, let's hear from you again with a quick poll.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. We want to know, who do you currently have involved in your OSOT? So Ryan said that he definitely recommends, strongly, incredibly recommends that you do not go at it alone, and we're sure that you don't. So who else do you include? Just let us know in the chat. Make sure that your notes go to all participants, and let us know. And as you're letting us know, because we love to hear from you and we love for you to bounce ideas off one another, I'm going to go back to Ryan, and he's going to talk about some of the people that he recommends that you follow up with and that you include in your OSOT. But keep them coming in the chat because we can always bounce ideas off of that as well. So Ryan, I'm going to have you kick us off.
Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, I'm seeing these chat responses, and you're going to see, or you're going to hear at least, and see me mention some of those in the next few slides. So you guys are right on the right track. As I said, the expertise is in the chat room, so to speak. The opportunity to engage a lot of people in OSAT is really high. I, again, look for the win-win. I think this is a place where you can have a lot of win-wins. You can provide a better, richer OSAT for your VISTA, and you can improve your relationship with partners and constituents. We've talked a lot about engaging others in your organization in this process and how important and helpful that is. I've worked with partner organizations, some of this will blow your mind, I'm sure, where the executive director couldn't even tell you what a VISTA is or how the VISTA is serving in their own organization. So don't be that organization. Make sure everyone understands how a VISTA works and the role the VISTA will play. A great way to ensure that that happens is to engage those leaders in the OSAT itself. If you've got a core of VISTAs, many VISTAs, you can have your leaders give a more formal presentation. I've done that in the past. But if you have one or a small number of VISTAs, even having coffee or a lunch meeting with an organizational leader is a nice casual way to provide OSAT and, as Michelle said, start the relationship with those people. If you're an organization that has multiple VISTAs, finding ways to have that VISTA to VISTA training is a great way to get started. VISTAs can provide information at a peer level that may be awkward for you or I to try to provide. I always ask the folks that I supervise, including the VISTAs, to give new people sort of the real talk about what it's like to report to me. I imagine the way that I would present it and the way they would present it would be a little bit different. Hopefully both good. There are lots of ways that current VISTAs can help orient new VISTAs. It's important to note, however, and this is really key, that the responsibility for OSAT sits with the supervisor and shouldn't be entirely offloaded to another VISTA. So just a key caveat there. Bringing in people from the community to help provide OSAT really gets to the win-win I mentioned or keep mentioning. How cool would it be for one of your experienced volunteers in your organization to be given some leadership opportunities to orient new vistas? It sends a message to both the VISTA and the volunteer that you value the role that volunteers play in your organization, like I know all of you do, because it's always an important concept. That's also an opportunity with your donors. Where appropriate, you can plug them into an OSAT and get that win-win again. The VISTA gets more information and training, and the donor feels incredibly connected to the work and invested in more ways than just financially, also a win. And those same ideas ring true for community members as well, the same concept, the same win-win opportunity. When talking about who needs to be involved, it's important to mention some key pieces for intermediary supervisors and sub-site supervisors. If you're a single site supervisor, you don't have the bifurcation of roles during OSAT that you often have within the intermediary sub-site relationship. There will need to be an OSAT provided by both the intermediary and the sub-site. The guiding principle in communicating about OSAT responsibilities and ensuring a mutual understanding of expectations between the intermediary and sub-site. The guiding principle is communicating about the OSAT, the responsibilities. Typically, the intermediary provides high-level content, often around education and the approach to the work. It's more philosophical in nature, I guess is what I'm saying. For the sub-site, it's more on the ground issues, practical, day-to-day content that we've really described previously. In my program, I had VISTAs dispatched across college campuses, as I mentioned, and as the intermediary, I provided that high-level detail training right after PSO around service learning, structure of higher ed, some of those high-level details. And then once the VISTA arrived at the sub-site, they received OSAT around how the college worked, how their sub-site worked, what they included in the VAD, what they wrote, and what I approved. They took the information I provided and made it local. This should all be worked out prior to your VISTA's arrival, like most parts of the OSAT should, and it's completely up to each project to determine these roles. So what I give you as an example. I also recommend developing an MOU or agreement of some type that's a formal document between the intermediary and the sub-site. Most of you actually probably have a document like that, but it should include and outline specific responsibilities for the OSAT in black and white. Who will do what and by when, and that alleviates a lot of the confusion and misunderstanding that can leave your VISTAs with nobody giving them the information they need to get their year started. You don't want to be staring at each other saying, oh, I thought you were going to do that. That's really awkward. For sub-site supervisors, the responsibility is on your shoulders to carry out the OSAT using the advice and the ideas we've provided already. To all kinds of supervisors, for those of you that have participated in VISTA's formal supervisor orientation, you spent an entire session where you thought about your role and structure of your OSAT, so definitely draw on the work that you started there. Michelle, can I turn it over to you?
Yes.
Give some actual examples.
You sure can. I want to just kind of piggyback on what you said about using a variety of different people. We have our VISTAs on the same level of the organizational chart as the people that they deal with most. So getting them real familiar right away with those folks is key. We also included the VISTAs in lots of meetings for a variety of experiences, board meetings, committee meetings, event meetings, planning meetings. This gave them really an overview on different aspects of the agency, and as they went through their year, if it was appropriate, I would give them time to really present at those meetings. So they were able to build their skills, get exposed to a wide variety of people, and that, I think, benefited them very well. Back to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Michelle. So that final question that we need to ask ourselves is sort of a catch-all, right? Are there other considerations? And a concept like OSAT really can't be summed up in the topics that we've had time to discuss so far. So, of course, there's other considerations that we haven't covered. And I'm sure already you've thought of a few. Wait, what about XYZ in your head? So take those ideas out of your head and let's share them in another chat question.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, so as Ryan just mentioned, let us know what other considerations should we think about when we plan our OSOT. Ryan's talked about a lot. You know, what do they need to know? How is it going to be delivered? Who's going to be there to deliver that? But what else do we need to think about? So once again, put those in the chat. Send it to all participants. Ryan's going to talk about a couple of additional considerations that we want you to be aware of. Sure, you're aware of them already, but doesn't hurt to reiterate it. So Ryan, you want to start us off on our first one there?
Yes, thanks, Jessica. We've brainstormed a couple of additional considerations, including some of the ones that you've listed here in your chat too, although obviously there's going to be a lot. Have you carved out time? So you've got to make sure that there is enough time to do this. And what type of training have they already had? So we talked about PSO, we talked about VMO or VMO, so we can jump into that. VISTA candidates who attend PSO travel to a regional location across the country to participate in a 3.5-day orientation. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this concept. And at PSO, we address the terms, the conditions, the benefits of service, and the key programming principles to VISTA candidates in large and in small group sessions. It's a really good time. VISTAs tend to really like it. You can find an actual outline in the activities that VISTA participate in during the PSO on the VISTA campus for a better idea of what they'll be arriving on site having experienced. You can see some of those things on the screen right now. VISTA candidates enrolled in the new VMO or VMO will complete pre-service online forms and coursework prior to starting their service, and they'll have recommended coursework that they should take and complete within their first 2 weeks of service. The coursework recommended for their first weeks of service is designed to really dovetail with your OSOT, so it's designed to work together. You're really the one in the driver's seat here, which is the greatest benefit, I think, of VMO, as you're going to be able to determine what they experience as part of their orientation. The coursework we recommend is meant to help you and your VISTA member to learn about the VISTA program, the community, again, that they're going to be serving in, and their VISTA assignment. This allows you to ensure a smooth transition into the OSOT, again, as you can build both VMO and OSOT to strongly connect. Is the VISTA relocating is another consideration that you'll want to consider. Michelle mentioned this issue earlier, so what kind of culture shock might they experience when they're relocating, and how can you help lessen that culture shock and have them enter and exit a community, your community, respectfully? And then finally, does the VISTA require any accommodations? One of the key principles of VISTA is accessibility for those with disabilities or differing abilities. So you'll want to make sure you know that coming in, and we'll make the appropriate accommodations because we want folks with all sorts of abilities plugged into the VISTA and National Service movement. I think that's it for me. Jessica, what else do we have?
Ryan, you and Michelle have given us such good information, talked about a lot of additional considerations, talked about what they need to do to plan their OSOT, what needs to be included, who needs to be included, and you did a wonderful job. You and Michelle did a great job, but we know that people may have questions. So we want to take this time now to answer any of the questions that you may have. So you can ask a question, as we mentioned, using the Q&A panel, which is located on the right of your screen. I'm also going to ask the operator to come on the phone again to let us know how to ask a question over the phone. Before I do that, you will see a poll that has opened on the right side of your screen. It is an evaluation to let us know what you liked about the webinar, what you want to see more of, what we can do better on. We really take your feedback to heart, and we want to design webinars that you like and that get to the information that you need. So take a moment, fill out that on the right side of your screen. And operator, can you let us know how you can ask a question over the phone?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. If you would like to ask a question, you'll want to press *1 on your touch-tone phone. You'll want to unmute your phone if you've done so and record your name clearly, as it helps me introduce the question. Again, to ask a question over the phone line, it is *1, and it does take just a few moments for those questions to come through.
Thank you so much. So as we wait for any questions to come in over the phone, just as a recap, we know we were talking about OSAT a lot. Remember, OSAT is on-site orientation and training. We do love our acronyms, so there is that's what the acronym stands for. I'm going to ask Rachel and Jenny to see if any questions have come in through the Q&A. Rachel, Jenny, do you see any questions that have come in?
Yeah, there was a question about going over performance expectations and reporting requirements and when they should be covered in the VA-PHT report or reporting in general and how that ties in.
Thank you. So I'm not sure. I think that the report that you're speaking of may be something very specific to your project, or very specific, maybe you're a sub-site and that's what your intermediary asks. When it comes to like expectations and reporting, I mean, that should happen at OSAT, but I'm going to let Ryan chime in, and Michelle, you know, when you've managed VISTAs, when you've brought them on board, you know, when do those conversations happen, especially around reporting? Like, is it more closely to when reporting is going to happen? Do you try to knock it all out at the beginning? How have you handled that?
Oh, I've definitely got an answer for this, Jessica, and this is going to be one of the places where I made a big mistake. So in my first go-round, I did not cover reporting with the VISTAs until it was closer to the time of reporting, and then it was like chaos. It was pressure for the VISTAs that I didn't mean to provide to them, panic about how to count what and who's counting what and where we're reporting what and what system we're reporting, and it just turned out to be quite the kerfuffle. So fast forward to the end of that year, as I planned the OSAT for the next year, I built in plenty of time around reporting during the OSAT. And so I was the intermediary, again, remember, and so I covered intermediary reporting with the VISTAs, how we were going to report basically to you, Jessica, and our friends at the corporation, and the system we were using, the time frame, and how to count stuff, and how we were defining things, all of that. I mean, we spent hours and hours on it, but it was time well invested. And then as soon as they got to their host sites, their sub-sites, those supervisors also covered, here's how we do our reporting up to Ryan, who then aggregates and reports up to the corporation. So everyone was covered with reporting and metrics and tracking right away, and it went incredibly smoother after that by doing it that way. Lesson learned.
Thank you. Michelle, anything to add to that?
Well, I would agree with Ryan on that. The sooner that you're able to talk about that and get people thinking about what they need to collect data on, the more successful those reports are going to be and the less painful they're going to be to create. So I agree. Just put that through the training process in the beginning and everyone will be set up for more success.
Wonderful. Thank you. So a question came in around came in the registration, and it's around OSAT, but it's also around preparing those folks at your organization for the VISTA's arrival. So, you know, the VISTA's going to come, they're going to meet with these people, or you want to set them up to meet with these people, you're including other people in the OSAT, what do they need to know, but your staff hasn't been briefed on them. So what are strategies that you've used to, you know, to inform your staff of, A, what a VISTA member is, what they're going to be doing, and kind of what their role is. I'm going to go to you, Michelle, first. Have you had that happen, and how have you done that before?
Yeah, well, it's interesting enough that, you know, we used a lot of our staff in the recruiting process. So they sort of became familiar with what we were doing, that it was something new, what it was all about, and then, you know, the type of person that we were looking for. So then when that person came, we had been using our employee e-news as well as our social media in the recruitment process, and I think that that really helped set that person up for when they were hired and they were coming, and there was excitement because we had all worked so hard in the recruiting process for them to be on site and here and sharing then kind of their story, how they had gotten there, and then, you know, what they were going to do. So I think just being open throughout that whole process was really a benefit for us, and they were really embraced. People were prepared, and in a lot of cases, they helped get them there.
Thank you, Michelle. And that's great that you incorporate the staff in a lot of that. You know, some organizations have the capacity. Some of them are like, we have thousands of people. We can't have everybody in here. But that's wonderful, and that you keep people up to date kind of with like an employee, I'm going to call it a newsletter, but something like that. I think that's great. Ryan, anything else to piggyback on?
Yeah, I did a lot of the same things as Michelle. I think they're great strategies and worked really well. One of the things I made sure to do is, as we were gearing up to bring VISTAs on, was to talk about the process in staff meetings, and probably talked about it nonstop till people wanted to shout at me to stop. But I wanted to make sure they knew this was happening, how it would affect them, and then I made sure to highlight very specific things that might cause problems for staff. So we hosted an advocacy day every year, so making sure that they knew that the VISTAs couldn't participate in the advocacy day and they couldn't staff the advocacy day, and that, you know, their vacation policy was different than ours, and that their living allowance policy was different than ours, you know, the difference in pay. So that in normal conversations, how you might interact with seemingly your coworkers and say these things and talk about these things, they needed to know is going to be different, and they shouldn't portray it as the same to the VISTAs, so that we're all on the same page.
Thank you, Ryan. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like the advocacy is making sure there's that clean line of like, VISTAs are like employees in this way, but they can't do these certain things. I think that's great. And it really, I know that sometimes people feel, VISTAs have explained, you know, said to us, like, people kind of feel like I'm, you know, they don't know what I'm doing here, or they're worried I'm trying to come and take their job. And the more understanding that the staff have and the VISTA has about each other's work is only going to cause it to be a greater relationship, rather than, like, who are you, why are you here? So thank you for that. I'm going to go to the phone. Are there any questions that have come in over the phone?
At this time, I am showing no questions over the phone line.
All right. Well, we don't have any final questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to say thank you to everyone for being with us here today. Thank you for your questions, and we want to see you back. Please come and see us next month, April 17th, Tuesday, April 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern for Orienting Your VISTA. This is implementing your OSAT plan. So now you know what you need to prepare for. Now we're going to talk about how to implement that. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for being Rockstar VISTA supervisors.